Welcome back, adventurers, to another episode of Underdark Cellars. Today we are diving right back into the Mighty Nine by focusing on our favorite seaworthy warlock / paladin, Fjord. Now, Fjord is a half-orc sailor who gets his start working on a ship, and unfortunately that ship is blown to smithereens, and his beloved mentor / captain perishes at sea. Now, I think Fjord would love a good surf and turf feast, so that is exactly what we were doing. We're going to start by stabbing the ever-living daylights out of some baked potatoes. We are making crab-stuffed twice-baked potatoes. Yes, you heard me correctly. It's going to be delicious. We're going to stab them until we feel that they are not going to explode. Really, this is just a precaution to keep them from blowing up inside the oven. And then we're going to oil them up generously with a little bit of canola oil. You can also use avocado oil. You just want something with a really, really high smoke point. Olive oil could work, but because we're roasting it at 400 for so long, I don't want it to burn. So we're going to put those directly on the oven rack at 400 degrees for about an hour. While that's going, we are going to prep our ribeye. Now, we are not by any means getting ready to cook our ribeye right now. I just figured about an hour ahead of time I wanted to start seasoning our ribeye with some salt and pepper, and we're gonna flip it over, make sure to season both sides. Now, I don't know if you know how to pick a ribeye, so welcome to The More You Know Cow Edition with Underdark Cellars. Now, class, if you did not know, this is a cow. I'm glad we're all on the same page now. Specifically, this breed of cow is an American Angus, and it can also be referred to as a Black Angus, though I feel like that's more of a marketing term. There are technically a few different subspecies of Angus, including a Red Angus, but we're not going to get into that today. Really, just you need to know that when you go to the grocery store and you see something marketed to you as like premium Black Angus, that's this cow. It's the most common Angus cow we see in the United States, primarily used for meat production because they're so good at turning forage or like grass that's grown in a field into good meat with good marbling. Now, let's talk about cuts of beef. How do you pick the best cut of meat for what you want? As a general rule, the more a part of the cow is exercised, the tougher the meat is going to be. So for example, one of the reasons that flank steak, think like carne asada, fajitas, is so tough is because it's basically being exercised all the time on the bottom abdominal area of the cow. It's really tough abs. Filet mignon, however, comes from the tenderloin, which is horizontal and lays across the loin of the cow. Very rarely exercised, does very, very little work, super, super, super tender, melts in your mouth, buttery. Typically, the more tender and fatty the meat, the more expensive because the fat typically equates to flavor. So how do you get a good cut of beef? Now, first decide what you're looking for. Figure out how much you're willing to spend. Now, beef is graded like you were in high school. Now, for the sake of really hammering this home into the brain-rotted minds of all of you who are watching, we are going to be putting this in an S tier list because I feel like the internet struggles to remember things unless they're put in this format now, because this is the world we live in. So we're going to be turning the USDA ranking into an S tier list. So at the very bottom in E tier, we're going to have canner grade, cutter grade, utility grade. Now, this is graded on a couple of things. One, the marbling content in the beef, but also the age of the cow. So as the cow gets older, okay, the meat gets tougher. It's just the way that it goes. So older cows with less marbling are going to be used for mostly ground beef. It's going to be really low grade. It's going to be used for like a lot of processed stuff. Think like anyway, but just that's what it's going to be used for. Next, we have D tier. This is going to be commercial. Again, this is going to be used largely for processed foods. This is not going to be sold in stores. So you don't really have to concern yourself with the stuff in D or E tiers. Next, though, up in C tier is standard. Now, USDA standard, it's lower quality, so it's going to be ungraded or store brand meat. Okay, so if you're going to get like a chub, which is the term for like one of those like wrapped 1 pound portions of ground beef, a chub of beef, and it's, says great value or like Kroger, that's typically what this is going to be. This is going to be standard. Okay, next, B tier. Okay, we're getting into the good stuff. We're getting into select, USDA select. Now, there's a little less marbling, but it's still it's still more marbling, still more tender than C, D, and E, okay? But it's just gonna be less tender than A and S. Now, does not mean it's bad by any means. B tier is still pretty dang good, okay? So now we have A tier. This is USDA choice. This is high quality and a lot of marbling, but just less marbling than primes. This is still like really, really good beef, okay? And then we have USDA prime, which is the highest quality, super well marbled, tender, super flavorful. That is just kind of how you can think about these. Maybe this is just a way you can think about these. So next time you're at the store, okay, and you see like USDA choice and USDA select, and you're wondering what the difference is between the two, one's A tier, one's B tier. That's the difference. So you just know what you're paying for. In my opinion, some cuts of beef it doesn't necessarily matter if you're going with USDA prime or USDA choice. Now for ribeye, which is what I'm using, I picked a ribeye that had a good amount of marbling. It's because it's graded on a spectrum, okay? So you have like a really, really dense amount of marbling, and there's a little less marbling, and then there's like no marbling. So let me walk you through the process of how I chose what steak to cook. Now, the reason I chose ribeye is because I feel like it just has that fattiness that is really satiating, and I feel like a big guy like Fjord would really like. Alternatively, if cost is a concern, you could easily grab like a top sirloin or a sirloin steak or a New York strip or even a chuck steak, which is about 56% cheaper. Now, keep in mind, some of these are gonna be a little less tender. You could easily swap it out though. I thought about doing a porterhouse, but I didn't want to spend that much money on one steak. So let's move on to actually picking the steak in store. Okay, so first and foremost, you want to look at color. Okay, so on the right, you'll see that the steak is a little more brown than the steaks on the left. Now, the reason for that is because it's older, it sat out longer, and that's led to the oxidation of the myoglobin. Now, that's the protein that gives beef its red or pink color. So the older a steak is, the longer it's set out, the browner that's going to be. So you want to choose something that's a little on the redder side. Now that we have gotten the color out of the way, we are going to look into the marbling. Now, to be very clear, there is a distinct difference between marbling, which is the tiny amounts of fat interspersed throughout the meat, and the fat. So those thick white bands, those are fat. That's not what we're taking into account for the marbling in the meat. So you'll see on the right, there's a couple streaks of marbling throughout the steaks. Mostly you can see that on the bottom, but on the left, on the bottom, if you look exactly opposite, you'll see that there's quite a bit of marbling throughout the meat. The next steak up, you'll see the ones in the middle, the exact same thing. But you'll see these are both still labeled USDA choice, even though the one on the left has significantly more marbling than the one on the right. So for the sake of this project, I chose the ones on the left. So those are ultimately the ribeyes I chose. Now here I'm preparing the surf. In this case, I am using scallops. Since we're having crab stuffed twice baked potatoes, I thought scallops would be a very easy, simple way to add to the surf elements of this dish. We're removing the adductor muscles that run alongside the scallop. Now those are very, very tough, so you want to make sure that you are removing those. Also, you want to be very careful what scallops you're purchasing. You want to make sure you're getting dry packed scallops, not wet packed scallops, because wet packed scallops are packed in a water mixture along with a couple other ingredients that can kind of like make the scallops swell to make them look a little bit larger. And the reason why that matters is when you're cooking the scallops down, that water is going to be released from the scallop, and you're going to run into an issue getting a good crust on the bottom of the scallop. So you'll see actually later when I am cooking the scallops that I run into issues using a stainless steel pan because the water was interfering with the oil that I put in the pan to help like get a good crust. Now I'm actually working on a chimichurri, so you saw me chop up a bunch of cilantro. Here I'm chopping up a bunch of parsley, and I'm also going to mince a couple cloves of garlic. I'm just going to peel the garlic, and then I'm going to finely mince it. Once that's minced, we're going to put that in the bowl, and then we're going to move on to our serrano pepper. Now I'm using just one serrano pepper for this. Make sure it's nice and ripe. We're going to chop off the top and the bottom, and then we're going to make one incision lengthwise to kind of unroll the pepper so that we can de-seed it and then cut it into strips. turn those 90 degrees, and then we are going to cut that into chunks, give it just a nice final mince to make everything about the same size as the garlic, and then we're going to put that in the bowl as well. I wanted to tie together the flavors in the garlic butter and the chimichurri, so I'm also going to be adding the zest and juice of 1 lemon along with a little bit of salt and some olive oil, and we're going to mix that together. We're also going to add in some chili flake and white wine vinegar and mix that together. Now, I wanted a particular texture for my chimichurri, so I'm just going to add a little bit of olive oil at a time until I get something I'm pretty happy with. Something that is still like fluffy, but it's still kind of like an herb sauce. I don't want anything that is like necessarily oily. Now, while that's chilling in the fridge, we're also going to grate an 8-ounce block of extra sharp cheddar. I'm using Tillamook. We're just gonna grate this for the twice baked potatoes. We're just gonna put this in a bowl, and we are going to set that aside before we work on the garlic for the garlic butter. It's not a fancy mince. We're just going to chop this up. We're going to transfer that to a mortar and pestle to crush and really make sure that butter can be infused with garlic before we move on to finishing our potatoes. Now, once those are done roasting for an hour, we're going to give them another spritz of avocado oil or canola oil and put them back in the oven for 30 minutes at 450. While we work on our butter, we're just going to take a stick of unsalted butter and that garlic, and we're going to melt that low and slow over super, super low heat, like barely on, just so it doesn't, the garlic doesn't burn. And then we're going to prep the crab meat for our twice baked potatoes. Double check that you're getting all of the cartilage and bony components out of the crab meat, because it would really, really suck to take a bite of this potato and then have like the roof of your mouth impaled with cartilage. So we're going to scoop out the baked potato and put that in with the crab, and so we're gonna have these boat. I cut them kind of low. They definitely look like little boats. The goal was for them to look like little potato ships. So we're going to empty those out. You'll see, I'm going to lift it up. You can see just how empty I got that. So repeat that for all of your potatoes. Now we're going to mash everything together with a potato masher just to make sure that any large clumps of potato are broken up and that the crab is nice and shredded. We're going to add in about half of that garlic butter and all of the cheese. All of the cheese. We're also going to add some parsley and some Old Bay seasoning because it just goes so well with crab. We're going to add a splash of cream along with some sour cream. We are going to mix this all together until it's nice and fluffy. Just mash that together again, make sure all of those elements are combined, and we're going to stuff that back into the potato skins. I really wanted to pack it in there, so I'm going to place it in, and then I'm just going to press it into the sides of the potato so we get some structural integrity. And now we're going to pack it back on top, and you'll see I cut the sides down low like I said before so that I could like dome it on top, and look, it's a little potato ship. It's a little potato crab ship. It's adorable. Look at it. That looks amazing, and these taste so good. If crab is not your thing, sorry. You can also use imitation crab for these. It would be just as good. So good. And then we're going to brush this with some of that garlic butter. Like I said, we reserved about half. And then we're going to finish prepping these for the oven by sprinkling on just a little bit more Old Bay seasoning before we put these back in the oven, this time on a cookie sheet for about 30 minutes, just to make sure that everything can warm up, the cheese can melt. If you run into the problem like me where there's more filling than potato space, you can just pack it into a dish. Again, brush it with some garlic butter, throw on some Old Bay seasoning, and pop that in the oven, and it's actually a great dip. While the potatoes are finishing up in the oven, we're going to bring the steak to room temperature and prep it to be reverse seared. Now, after the potatoes are removed, we're going to let the oven cool off to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are going to cook this in an oven-safe skillet until the temperature reads 120 degrees. Then we're going to remove it from the oven. Now, while that's in the oven, we're going to prep the scallops again by just rotating those paper towels, making sure they're as dry as possible, because again, these are wet packed scallops and I really wanted to avoid them leaching too much water into the pan. Unfortunately, there wasn't much I could do to prevent that completely, but I was able to minimize how much water they released by just having them dry out on some paper towels. Now, while the steak is finishing in the oven, we're going to get cast iron ripping hot. I achieved that by setting my pan over the highest heat for like 10 to 15 minutes. Like, it took me a little while to get to that hot. By the time my pan was smoking, it was ready to put the ribeye in. We're gonna let that cook for 90 seconds on each side. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Leave it alone, exactly. Just leave it alone. You can go ahead and add some more seasoning if you would prefer. I went ahead and added some more cracked black pepper and some more fresh ground salt and just pressed that gently into the steak. And then I flipped it over and proceeded to do the same thing on the other side. I didn't get the color that I quite wanted. I'm wondering if maybe my induction stove is starting to wear out a little bit. So I went ahead and cooked it a little longer on the other side. So I got a tiny bit of gray banding on the top, but we're gonna go ahead and cook all of the edges as well because I just wanted a see how beautiful and golden that's looking. It's just looking nice. Now it's gonna smoke a bit because of the peppercorns, but it's gonna be great. So once that's done, we're gonna remove it from the pan and then we're going to go ahead and cook those scallops. Now I told you these are wet packed scallops, so we're gonna see in action that cooking them the way you would cook dry scallops in a stainless steel pan with a little bit of oil on the bottom is not gonna work. So we're gonna put these in, like I said, I put this in a stainless steel pan with a little bit of oil in the bottom. We're gonna cook them for 1 to 2 minutes on either side. You're gonna see that they're gonna start to develop a really nice golden color, but because they're releasing so much water, I feel like they washed away the oil directly underneath the scallop. So it took what would be a non-stick, nice, like crust on a scallop, and it permanently affixed it to the bottom of the pan and ended up tearing the scallops in a couple pieces. Now, thankfully, I had the thought to do this in 2 batches, not to overcrowd the pan. So I ended up switching to a non-stick skillet with a little bit of avocado oil spray and salt. And this worked much better for wet pack scallops. So in my opinion, if you're gonna cook wet pack scallops, use a non-stick skillet. If you're gonna use dry pack scallops, you can use stainless steel, but I mean, honestly, I might just cook them with my non-stick skillet anyway, just to keep them from sticking to the pan. After that's done, we're gonna cook up some asparagus, and then we're just going to drizzle some of that lemon garlic butter over the scallops, and then I think we're gonna be ready to plate. We're gonna cut the steak across the grain. Look how beautiful. Do you see how beautiful that looks? The minimal gray banding, oh my gosh. Let your steak sit. So once we're, let it sit, don't touch it while you finish everything else. We're gonna plate this up. We're gonna put a twice baked potato on there. We're gonna put some asparagus on there. We're gonna put the steak on there. And then we're going to just, try and get that to look nice in a photo. And then we're gonna add those scallops, and oh my gosh, aren't they beautiful? Aren't they beautiful? The color turned out so good. We're just gonna stack that in like a set of 5. Oh gosh, just drizzle a little more garlic butter on there. Add a little more garlic butter onto the potato, a sprinkle of Old Bay, some additional parsley, and then that chimichurri, just in case you forgot, we're gonna put that directly down the center of the steak. That slapped. Honestly, I would eat this chimichurri alone. Now you might think the video is over, except it's not just Fjord we're dealing with here. He is a warlock. He has a pact with Uk'otoa. So we're actually going to be making a non-alcoholic gin and tonic to serve with this meal that I call the Uk'otoa. Now, without getting into too many spoilers regarding Uk'otoa, we're going to go ahead and say that these lemon wedges represent his eyes, because his eyes are kind of freaky deaky. They're giant, they're yellow, and they have this very dark, long slitted pupil. So we're going to go ahead and take 3 thin lemon slices, and we are going to make sure that those don't have any seeds in them. Then we're going to take a kitchen torch and we are going to char the pith and core of the lemon so it looks like a really weird eyeball. I went ahead and charred them again just to make sure that the effect of that dark pupil core radiating outwards was really, really apparent. Went ahead and then stacked them in my highball glass. I actually overestimated how tall my highball glass was, so I had to alternate them, so they were kind of off center. The intent though was for them to be stacked 3 in a row. Okay, so we're going to lay those on the side, and then we're going to support those in the glass with ice. Next, we're going to take some blue spirulina, and we are going to add that to our gin alternative, and we are going to shake that with ice. We're going to add a splash of lemon juice. We're going to add about 4 ounces of tonic water, and then we're going to add the gin alternative, stir, and here is the ukatoa. Adventurers, that brings us to the end of the episode. This was one of my favorite episodes I've done so far. Not only was just this super delicious, but I think doing the dinner and drink pairing was a lot of fun. But that brings us to the end of the episode. Adventurers, if you like what you saw, smash that like button. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, drop those down below. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, to ring the bell for notifications so you're the first to know when new videos go live, and share this video with someone you want to make this with. That's it though, adventurers. As always, take care of yourselves, do something nice for someone else, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.